I never thought I'd end up stuck in the middle of nowhere with a storm closing in and no way out. But that's Alaska for you. One moment, you're laughing with your crew over coffee in the rig camp, and the next, everything can turn into a fight for survival. That February, my friend Alex and I were working a temporary drilling site about 60 miles north of Deadhorse. The company had sent us there for a 2-week rotation, mostly maintenance and security checks. The place was basic: a few modular shelters, a generator, satellite comms that were more temperamental than helpful, and a lot of open tundra. When you're out there, the cold isn't just cold, it's a living thing, trying to get under your skin, into your lungs. We'd been on site for 4 days when the first storm hit. Visibility dropped to less than 20 feet, and the wind shredded anything not anchored down. I was checking the perimeter with Alex when we saw a figure stumbling across the snow about a half-mile from camp. At first, we assumed it was another worker who'd misjudged the storm, but as we watched, our stomachs sank. He wasn't waving, calling out, or even trying to navigate toward the shelter. He was moving erratically, almost panicked, with heavy boots breaking through the snow in uneven steps. "Should we go get him?" Alex asked. His voice carried that tight edge of worry I'd heard before in dangerous situations. "We don't leave anyone out there," I said, gripping my rifle more for comfort than for use. "You never know what you might run into this far north." By the time we got within a few dozen yards, it became obvious this guy was badly hurt. His parka was ripped along one sleeve, and he had bruises forming on his face from falling. He tried to speak but could barely get a word out, lips blue, teeth chattering. Alex and I exchanged a look. He was hypothermic, no doubt about it. We got him into one of the snowcats and started him toward the shelter. That's when the story became more than just survival. While helping him, we noticed something strange. He had a small bag, roughly packed, and it wasn't the kind of survival kit you'd expect. A pistol, some cash, and documents that didn't belong to him. I remember feeling that knot in my stomach tighten. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, encountering a guy like this meant trouble. Once inside the shelter, we tried warming him up, giving him coffee, blankets, and a little food. His story came out in broken sentences. He'd been fleeing something dangerous, and didn't want to say more. I could see Alex's jaw tighten. He'd worked security before, and the look on his face meant he was thinking the same thing as me. This guy was trouble. The storm raged outside for hours, and inside, we kept him under watch. He was restless, pacing the small space between bunks, muttering under his breath, clearly anxious. We tried to make small talk, asked questions, anything to gauge whether he'd be cooperative. He didn't answer most of them, only muttering phrases like, "They're coming," and "I can't go back." That's when Alex suggested barricading the door. Not that we expected anyone to show up, but instinct told us not to take chances. By late evening, the wind had eased slightly. That's when it happened. A set of tracks appeared outside the shelter door, heavy boots, dragging slightly in the snow. Not our guys, not ours. Someone was walking through the storm, deliberately, with the kind of determination that makes you uneasy. "Holy shit," Alex whispered. I grabbed the rifle, ready but silent. We moved to block the entrance, listening as crunching snow came closer. Whoever it was, they were careful not to make noise beyond what the storm already did. The door rattled once, twice, and then a voice. "Open up. Don't make me break it." My stomach dropped. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and isolated. If it came to it, the storm outside was just as deadly as any confrontation inside. I gestured to Alex. He nodded. We moved slowly, keeping the rifle ready. "Who is it?" I called through the door. No answer. Just more footsteps shifting in the snow. The stranger was testing us. Our guest, he crouched against the wall, eyes darting, clearly terrified, but also calculating. The standoff felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Then the stranger outside threatened again, and something in our guest's eyes shifted. He moved quickly, almost too fast, bolting toward a small emergency exit we hadn't thought to barricade. Alex reacted immediately, tackling him to the ground. The struggle was brief but tense. I could see the desperation in his face, the fear and the adrenaline. Eventually, we got control, pinned him, and disarmed him. The pistol in his bag explained everything: the cash, the documents. He was running from a crime he committed, and now it had caught up with him here. We had no choice but to call it in. The storm was still bad, so we patched him in blankets and guarded him until the state troopers arrived the next morning. The whole time, Alex and I never relaxed, never left his side, every sound outside making our hearts jump. By the time the helicopter landed, daylight had returned. We handed him over, explaining everything, but the adrenaline lingered. The isolation, the storm, the unknown stranger, it all combined into a feeling I'll never forget. Out here, you're never just fighting the cold. You're fighting the unknown, the human element, and sometimes your own instincts. Driving back later, Alex and I were quiet. The Dalton had claimed many stories, many lives, but that one felt close. Too close. It reminded me that out here, survival isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about reading the people around you, trusting your gut, and knowing that any stranger you pick up could either need help or bring danger with them. And in the Alaskan winter, you never get a second chance. I thought I knew the North Slope, but that night reminded me just how unforgiving it can be. I'd been on a short rotation up near Prudhoe Bay, working as part of a small crew maintaining a remote pipeline station. My friends, Mike and Jared, were with me. We'd been joking about the cold on the drive north, swapping stories about past storms and near misses, but there's a point where humor fades and reality grabs you by the throat. That night, we found that point. We'd finished our maintenance work late in the afternoon, snow coming down steady and hard. The wind gusts were already strong, enough to make the headlights of our trucks bounce and blur. Visibility was maybe 25 feet, and the thermometer on my dash read 40 below. Even in our heavy parkas and boots, the cold was a living thing, creeping into your fingers, your toes, your lungs. We piled into Mike's old Dodge pickup, the kind with chains on all four tires, and set off down the icy road toward the camp. Jared rode shotgun, headphones in, nodding to a podcast, oblivious to the growing storm. I sat in the back, trying to catch my breath after shoveling equipment from the station into the truck. Mike was silent, eyes scanning the road, knuckles tight on the wheel. About an hour into the drive, something moved along the shoulder. A figure trudging through the snow, heavy steps, arms swinging, looking exhausted and half frozen. At first, I thought it might be a worker who had missed the shelter cutoff, but then I noticed the pack slung over his shoulder. The way his gait wasn't just tired, it was desperate. "Pull over," I said, my voice tight. Mike glanced at me but didn't argue. Out here, you never leave someone to die, no matter how stupid it looks. We stopped, jumped out into the storm. The wind hit like fists, blowing snow in our faces. I ran toward him first, Jared close behind. Mike hung back, scanning for any other danger. The man was shivering violently, lips blue, eyes watery. He tried to speak, but barely managed a whisper. Something about, "They're coming and need help." I grabbed his shoulder, steering him toward the truck. He stumbled, but didn't resist. His weight was uneven, almost like he was carrying more than just the pack. Once inside, we turned the heat to max. I stripped the wet gloves and socks off his hands and feet, wrapped him in blankets. He was breathing hard but shallow. I could see frost forming on his ears. This was bad. He wouldn't last long outside another hour. "Who are you? Where were you?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "No, can't. They'll find." Jared frowned, leaning over to peer at the bag he carried. He pulled it onto his lap, curiosity overtaking caution. Inside, we found cash, a handgun, and papers that didn't belong to him. My stomach sank. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, someone with a gun and cash was not someone to be trusted lightly. "Guys, this isn't just a lost hiker," Mike said quietly, and I could hear the tension in his voice. He wasn't wrong. The storm howled outside, rattling the cab, making the truck feel smaller, claustrophobic. I looked at our guest. His eyes darted nervously, watching the snow and sky like he was expecting someone. I didn't like it. Hours passed. The storm made it impossible to drive anywhere. We huddled inside the cab, keeping him warm, keeping watch. He was restless, muttering under his breath, clearly terrified. The wind outside created a constant low rumble, punctuated by sudden gusts that made the truck shudder. Every sound made my heart jump. Then came the knock. Not a soft tap, a deliberate pounding against the side of the truck. Mike and I froze. The man in the back stiffened, eyes wide, voice trembling. "They! Here!" I stepped to the door, rifle in hand. "Who's out there?" I yelled over the storm. No answer, just more pounding. The wind made it impossible to hear anything else. I glanced at Mike. His face was tight with worry. "They won't leave until they get him," he said. We barricaded the door with whatever we could find, toolboxes, a folding chair, even a snow shovel. The pounding continued, rhythmic, deliberate. I could hear heavy boots crunching in the snow. Whoever it was, they knew exactly where to find him. "Talk to me," I said, turning to our guest. "Who's after you?" He shook his head violently. "No, can't, they'll kill, the money, the papers." It became clear. He had stolen something valuable. Someone had come all the way out here in the middle of a blizzard to get it back, and we were trapped between him and them, 3 people in a small truck with nothing but snow and storm outside. The night stretched endlessly. The storm showed no signs of easing. Every few minutes, we'd hear the crunch of boots, the howl of wind, and the muffled threats of whoever was out there. We kept him awake, kept the fire of conversation alive, asking questions, joking, anything to keep his mind alert. Sleep now would have been a death sentence for all of us. By the early hours of the morning, we had devised a plan. We couldn't leave until the storm calmed, but if they forced entry, we had to be ready. Mike took position by the driver's side with the rifle. I stayed near the back with Jared, ready to block the emergency exit. Our guest sat in the middle, clutching the blanket around him, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Then, footsteps outside, heavier, faster, moving in a direction I didn't expect. Someone was circling, testing, waiting. I heard a voice, muffled by wind. "Come out, hand it over." We didn't respond. Silence. The storm swallowed all other sound. My hands shook. Jared whispered, "What if they try to break the windows?" I glanced at Mike. "We hold our ground. We survive. That's all that matters." Hours passed like this. Eventually, the snow began to ease, and faint daylight crept through the frost-covered windows. Whoever had been outside disappeared, retreating back into the storm or deciding the risk wasn't worth it. By the time we could move, the man was exhausted but alive, Port 6. We packed him into the truck carefully, ensuring he was warm, and drove him to the nearest checkpoint with communications. Law enforcement arrived, taking over, and we gave our statement. The papers and cash explained everything. They were looking for him, but out here, the storm had worked in our favor. Driving back to camp, the silence between Mike, Jared, and me was thick. The memory of pounding boots, the fear in our guests' eyes, the storm threatening to swallow us at any moment, it stayed with us. Out here, survival isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about making split-second decisions, trusting instincts, and sometimes getting lucky enough to live through a night like that. The North Slope doesn't forgive mistakes. You learn that fast. You also learn that people can be just as dangerous as the cold. That night, we survived both. I had been stationed at a remote pipeline checkpoint for a few weeks, a tiny cluster of modular shelters surrounded by nothing but white tundra. My rotation was almost over, but that night reminded me why you never take the North Slope lightly. I was sharing a cabin with my friend and coworker, Sam. We were checking equipment late, ensuring that nothing had frozen solid in the sub-zero temperatures. Outside, the wind rattled the shelters, snowdrifts piling higher than our boots could reach. We joked lightly about the friendly locals of Alaska, meaning no one at all. But the humor didn't hide the fact that being out here alone with nothing but wind and ice could get deadly fast. Around 8 p.m., a truck pulled up outside, headlights barely cutting through the white haze. That was unusual. Most traffic stopped hours earlier, knowing the storms could trap you in minutes. Sam and I exchanged a glance. I opened the door to see a man in a dark parka, hood up, trying to wave at us. His boots were caked in snow, face red from frostbite, but something in his posture made my stomach tighten. He was moving cautiously, scanning the surroundings, like he didn't trust the world. "Hey, you okay out there?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer immediately, just pointed toward the back of his truck, which was partially buried in snow. Sam stepped closer. "Looks like he needs help," he said, and I nodded. I helped him get inside. The cold had already slowed him down. He clutched a small duffel bag, which seemed heavy, awkward. Once inside, I stripped snow from his boots and gloves. Sam went to the heater and turned it to max. As he warmed up, we tried asking simple questions. "Name?" I asked. He hesitated. "Danny," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, almost breaking. We offered coffee, blankets, something to eat. He accepted the coffee shakily, but didn't say much more. That's when I noticed something odd. His duffel wasn't just clothes. There were small tools, cash, and what looked like a pistol holster peeking from the zipper. My heart skipped. Out here, in a place like this, encountering someone armed and secretive isn't something you can ignore. "Danny, what's in the bag?" I asked carefully. He swallowed hard. Can't explain." His eyes darted toward the window. "They'll come." That word made every hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Out here, the cold can kill, yes, but people can be worse. Sam and I exchanged a look. The wind grew stronger, snow flurries hammering the shelter walls. We decided to barricade the door with what we could find: toolboxes, benches, anything that might slow someone down. The storm had knocked out our satellite connection, so we couldn't call for help yet. Hours passed. Danny sat on the bunk, wrapped in a blanket, muttering fragments. "Not safe, can't trust, back for it." I listened carefully, trying to piece together the threat. Someone was after him, maybe for the cash, maybe for something worse. And if they were willing to track him out here, there was no telling what they might do. Around midnight, we heard it. Footsteps in the snow, crunching and dragging, methodical. Not accidental, not wandering. Someone was approaching deliberately. My pulse raced. Sam grabbed the rifle we kept for emergencies, and I checked the fire extinguisher. We needed a backup. The knocking came next, first soft, then sharp against the metal shelter. "Open up!" a voice shouted over the wind. "We know you're in there!" Danny froze, eyes wide, shaking slightly. I stepped in front of him. "You're not going anywhere outside tonight," I said firmly. The storm masked most sound, but I could hear the boots pacing outside, testing the walls. Whoever it was had experience. They didn't want to fight, just the bag, the cash, whatever it was he had. I whispered to Sam, "We need to hold them until morning." Sam nodded. He knew I was right. Out here, trying to escape in that weather meant certain death. We moved furniture to reinforce the door and windows, making as much of a barrier as possible. Danny stayed in the center, wrapped tight, staring at us, muttering, "They won't stop, they'll kill." Every hour dragged. We took turns staying awake, checking outside, listening for movements. The storm outside was relentless, the walls of the shelter rattling with gusts, each creak making us jump. Sleep was impossible. Survival meant alertness, every second counted. By 3 a.m., the footsteps had stopped, but the fear didn't. We stayed huddled, sharing blankets, whispering to Danny to keep him calm. We knew the danger wasn't gone, it had just retreated temporarily. Dawn would bring better visibility, and with it, the possibility of safe escape. When the first light appeared, we could see footprints trailing away from the shelter, disappearing into the snowdrifts. Whoever had been hunting him was gone, for now. We packed him carefully into our truck, blankets covering him, and drove slowly toward the nearest pipeline checkpoint with functioning communications. The ride was tense. Danny's hands still shook, but he could talk more now. He explained that he'd been involved in a scheme gone bad, that people were after him, and the bag held evidence and money that could ruin lives if it fell into the wrong hands. We listened, saying little, focusing on the road, the drifting snow, and the danger that might still be behind us. By the time we reached safety, I was exhausted, mentally and physically. The memory of the storm, the footsteps outside, and the cold reality of what could have happened stayed with me. Out here, survival isn't just about enduring the snow. It's about reading danger, trusting instincts, and being ready for anything. That day, I realized the North Slope doesn't just test your endurance. It tests your judgment, your courage, and sometimes your willingness to risk everything for someone else. Danny survived, and so did we. But the lesson was clear. Out here, the cold is just the beginning. The real danger comes from people. I had been working security for a small oil crew up near Prudhoe Bay for about 3 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and it came with the kind of isolation that either made you stronger or broke you. That night, I was scheduled for a late rotation patrol with my buddy, Clint. We were checking a series of storage tanks on the edge of a frozen plateau, several miles from the nearest shelter. The wind was already picking up, snow whipping sideways in sharp sheets, making it almost impossible to see more than a few feet in front of us. We were about halfway through the route when I noticed tracks in the snow, fresh, heavy boots, heading straight for one of the storage units. Clint slowed the ATV and squinted. "Not ours," he said quietly. My stomach tightened. Out here, in a storm like this, seeing someone else's tracks could mean any number of things, none of them good. We followed cautiously, trying to keep the machine's lights low, moving only in the gaps of the wind gusts. The tracks led to a small maintenance shed, one we had never used except for storing tools and spare parts. The door was slightly ajar. Whoever it was, they had been inside. I signaled Clint to cover me while I approached. Inside, the shed was empty, except for a trail of footprints leading out the back toward the frozen river that ran behind the tanks. I could see a figure in the distance, stumbling toward the tree line. Their coat was dark, almost black against the white snow, and they were carrying something bulky, wrapped in canvas. "Should we?" Clint started, but I shook my head. "Not a choice," I said. "We follow. Keep the ATV between us and the wind." We moved cautiously, keeping our distance. The figure stumbled often, and I noticed something strange. They weren't just tired, they were injured. There was a limp in the step, and the canvas bundle shifted with every movement. That's when the smell hit me. Coppery, metallic, blood. My stomach turned. Whoever this was, they weren't just fleeing, they were either hurt or carrying someone else who was. I glanced at Clint. His face was pale under the frost, teeth clenched, eyes wide. Neither of us spoke. Out here, the cold can kill you, but panic can kill faster. The figure stopped suddenly, collapsing to one knee. I could see them trying to drag the bundle further, but their strength was fading. I made the call. "We're going in. Get ready." Clint nodded, gripping his rifle. We ran toward the figure, boots sinking deep into the snow. The wind tore at us, snow blinding our vision, and every instinct screamed to turn back, but we couldn't leave someone out here to die or kill. When we reached them, I saw the full scope. A man, mid-30s, blood smeared on his face and hands, fighting to keep whatever was in the bundle from hitting the snow. He looked up at us, eyes wide, and muttered something incoherent. I grabbed his arm to steady him. "Calm down. We're here to help," I shouted over the wind. Clint helped lift the bundle. We could see the edge of a face. Someone unconscious, maybe worse. The man tried to resist, but exhaustion won. We dragged him toward the ATVs, using the machines as leverage to get through the drifts. Once back at the shelter, the real horror became clear. The person in the bundle was alive, barely, but bleeding heavily. The man who had brought them in, he refused to explain, muttering something about, "They'll come for me if I tell." I could tell immediately he wasn't just a random stranger. He was involved in something dangerous, something criminal, and it had followed him all the way here. The storm outside raged for hours, cutting us off from any help. We patched the injured person as best as we could, using what little supplies we had: bandages, tape, gauze, anything. Clint kept watch at the windows, scanning for movement, while I stayed with the man and the injured party, trying to coax some information out of him. Finally, he broke. "It was a robbery. Went wrong. They thought I took something," he muttered. The story came out in broken fragments. He had been part of a heist, and the people after him had killed his partner, leaving him to drag the survivor to safety. Out here, in the middle of a snowstorm, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Hours passed like days. We stayed alert, every sound outside making our hearts race. The injured person needed warmth and attention constantly, and the man who had brought them in was on edge, pacing, whispering to himself, clearly terrified of someone outside the storm. By dawn, the snow began to ease. Visibility improved just enough to see the tracks leading away from the shelter, heavy, deliberate, and unrelenting. Whoever had been hunting him had left temporarily, but the threat was far from gone. We had to move, had to get help, had to survive until law enforcement could reach us. We packed the injured person carefully into the ATV sled, blankets covering every inch, and set off cautiously toward the nearest checkpoint with satellite communications. The ride was tense, silent except for the scraping of the sled over ice and snow. I could see the exhaustion etched into Clint's face, the fear and determination in the man's eyes, and the vulnerability of the person we were trying to save. Hours later, we reached the checkpoint. Law enforcement took over, asking questions, securing the area. The man was detained, explaining the crime and the pursuit. The injured survivor received medical attention, and we finally allowed ourselves to exhale. Driving back to the main camp, I realized how thin the line is between life and death up here. The storm, the criminals, the isolation, it all comes together in a way that makes you reconsider every choice, every step, every instinct. Out here, survival isn't just about fighting the cold. It's about reading people, assessing danger, and knowing that in the Alaskan wilderness, help might be hours away or never come at all. That night, I learned something I'll never forget. The cold will take your body, the isolation will take your mind, and the wrong person at the wrong time can take everything else. And out here, on the North Slope, there's no one to save you but yourself. And maybe if you're lucky, a friend willing to brave the storm beside you. I was on my third season working the North Slope as a pipeline technician, and by now, I thought I had a solid grip on what this place could do to you. But some nights, it reminded you very quickly that experience didn't matter. That night started like any other. Long hours at a remote pump station, sub-zero temperatures, wind howling like it had a mind of its own. My coworker, Nate, and I were heading back to our shelter in a rusty old Chevy truck, headlights barely cutting through the swirling snow. We'd been joking about the storm forecasts earlier, laughing at the absurdity of thinking we could ever outsmart the Alaskan winter. But as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, the joke felt hollow. Visibility was down to maybe 15 feet, and the road was barely a trail through snowdrifts. About an hour into the drive, something moved. I slammed on the brakes, sending Nate forward against the dash. My heart jumped. There in the headlights, a figure staggered along the side of the road, barely upright. "Jesus, someone's out there," Nate muttered, squinting. I didn't answer. Out here in a storm like this, hesitation could mean death. I threw the truck in park, grabbed my heavy gloves, and stepped into the wind. The snow hit like shards of glass. Each step was a struggle. My boots sank into the drifts up to my knees. The figure was a man, maybe late 20s, parka shredded, gloves missing, face pale and red from frostbite. He wasn't walking like someone struggling with the cold. He was moving erratically, like he didn't know where he was or why he was moving. When he turned toward us, I saw the blood streaking from his temple, a jagged cut, likely from falling or hitting something sharp. We helped him to the truck. He was light for his size, almost suspiciously so. Once inside, Nate cranked the heat and I handed him a blanket. Who are you?" I asked, voice firm but careful. He shook his head, muttering incoherently, words lost in the wind hammering the truck. Then I noticed the bulge in his jacket, a small handgun. Out here, someone armed and half frozen could be more dangerous than the storm itself. "Put it down," I said, trying to keep calm. He did, slowly, placing it on the floorboard. That's when he finally spoke clearly. They're after me. Took something. Can't let them get it." Nate and I exchanged a look. Out here, the phrase "they're after me" never meant a friendly visit. We barricaded the truck with our bodies and blankets, trying to shield him from the cold and whatever else might find him outside. The snowstorm worsened. Each gust of wind made the metal of the truck shiver, rattling every panel. Outside, the world was an endless white void. Hours passed. He stayed silent mostly, only muttering fragments. "Not safe, can't, money, blood." The words made my stomach twist. Something serious had gone down, something criminal. Someone had risked tracking him all the way out here through a blizzard for whatever he had. Around 1 a.m., it began. Footsteps in the snow, crunching, deliberate, moving toward the truck. My pulse raced. Nate grabbed the rifle we kept for emergencies. I checked the side door, making sure the latches held. Whoever it was, they were methodical, not just wandering. Then came the pounding on the truck. Not weak or random, strong, precise. Someone wanted in, knew exactly where he was. "Stay calm," I whispered to our guest. His eyes were wide, fear evident. "You won't get through tonight," I added more firmly. The pounding continued, then stopped. Silence. The wind masked most sounds. My hands were numb, but adrenaline kept me sharp. Nate whispered, "They're circling, watching." We took shifts keeping him awake, checking windows, listening. Every sound, a snapping branch, crunch of snow, made us flinch. Sleep could get us killed. The hours crawled by. Finally, by dawn, the storm lessened. We could see faint footprints leading back into the trees, retreating. Whoever had been hunting him had left, at least temporarily. We carefully loaded him into the truck, keeping him warm with blankets, and began the cautious drive back to the nearest checkpoint. Each mile was tense. Tracks in the snow suggested they could still be nearby, watching. By the time we reached safety, the authorities took over. He explained in bits and pieces that he had been involved in an illegal shipment intercepted by dangerous individuals. He had fled into the wilderness to escape them. The storm had been our unintentional ally. Driving back to camp later, I realized something crucial. Survival out here wasn't just about enduring the cold. It was about reading people, understanding danger, and knowing that sometimes the storm itself could be your ally or your executioner. Out here, every decision, every second mattered. That night reinforced what I already knew. The North Slope doesn't forgive mistakes. It punishes hesitation. And out here, danger isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's silent, lurking behind a bloodied parka, a whispered warning, or footsteps in the snow. Survival means staying sharp, staying cold-blooded when the storm and criminals converge, and trusting no one completely, except the friend beside you willing to risk the same storm. I had been working the pipeline outpost for 4 years, and by now the isolation of the North Slope didn't surprise me anymore. Still, nothing prepares you for nights like that one. I was stationed at a modular camp about 50 miles south of Prudhoe Bay, sharing the rotation with 3 coworkers, Mike, Jesse, and Carl. We were a tight crew, the kind that relied on each other for everything: food, warmth, and sanity when the wind rattled the metal walls and snow blanketed the world in white. That evening, we had just finished a routine inspection of the outer tanks, checking for leaks and ice buildup. The wind was already picking up, a steady howl that promised a long night. We loaded into Carl's old Ford F-350, the one with chains on all 4 tires and a heater that could make your face feel like it was on fire, and started back to the shelter. Visibility was poor, maybe 20 feet at best. The snow was relentless, reducing the highway to a white blur. Mike was riding shotgun, navigating the winding frozen road with practiced precision. Jesse and I were in the back, trying to stay warm while also keeping an eye out for anything unusual. It happened fast. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared, stumbling across the snow like someone half-crazed. The headlights caught him just long enough for Mike to hit the brakes hard, sending Jesse sliding forward into my shoulder. The man wore a dark parka, hood up, gloves missing. He was dragging something behind him, a crate or box of some kind. We didn't hesitate. Out here, you don't leave someone to freeze. We pulled over, snow already piling around the truck, and braced ourselves against the wind as we approached. The closer we got, the more we realized this wasn't just a stranded traveler. His movements were erratic, panicked, like he was being chased. His face was pale, lips cracked from cold, eyes wide and darting, and then we noticed the blood, smears across his parka and hands. Whatever he was dragging was heavy, and it left a trail in the snow. "Need help?" I shouted, keeping my voice firm. He froze, eyes flicking toward us, and nodded. He didn't speak at first. Only when we got him into the truck did he mutter, almost incoherently, They're after me. Can't let them get it." Mike turned to us. "Sounds like trouble." I didn't need him to say it. Out here, danger doesn't knock politely. It shows up in blood trails and desperate eyes. We barricaded the doors and pushed the heater to max, trying to thaw both him and the tension that filled the cab. Over the next hour, he explained in fragmented sentences that he'd witnessed a crime, a robbery gone wrong. The perpetrators had tried to cover their tracks, but he had taken proof, something incriminating. That box he had been dragging, evidence they couldn't allow anyone to see, and now they were after him. The storm outside grew stronger, visibility dropping to almost nothing. We had no cell signal, satellite phones were unreliable in the blizzard, and the nearest checkpoint was at least 20 miles away. "We're not leaving you out there," Jesse said, voice sharp, "but we need to move somewhere safe." Carl and Mike nodded. "Shelter is priority. Then we figure the rest out," Carl said. We decided to head for an abandoned maintenance shack about 5 miles off the highway. The storm was relentless. We had to take it slow. Every mile felt like a marathon. The man barely spoke, muttering about, "They'll find us. Can't let them see." Finally, we reached the shack. It was a metal box of a building, nothing fancy, but it offered walls and some insulation. We brought the man inside, setting him near the heater. Jesse checked the box. Inside, there were several documents, photographs, and what looked like a small hard drive. The significance was clear. This wasn't just random. Whoever came after him was dangerous and well prepared. The first knock came around midnight. Heavy, deliberate, not just the wind. All four of us froze. Out here, in a storm, someone approaching isn't coincidence. Carl whispered, "They know he's here. Be ready." We barricaded the door with tables and crates, rifles at the ready. The knocking didn't stop. Then, through a crack in the wall, a voice shouted, demanding the box, threatening us. The man's hands shook as he pointed at the pile of evidence. It proves everything. They'll kill." We knew he was right. Out here, you don't get back up fast. You survive until you can either outsmart your pursuers or the storm buys you enough time. Hours passed like days. Every sound outside, the wind, a branch snapping, footsteps, made our hearts pound. We took turns keeping watch. Jesse stayed with the man, keeping him warm and calm. Carl and I rotated on the rifles, scanning through the frosted windows. Mike was on lookout, trying to monitor any movement through the endless white. By early morning, the storm eased slightly. Footprints led away from the shack, retreating. Whoever had been hunting him had temporarily withdrawn. We packed the evidence carefully, preparing to move back toward the main camp. The drive back was tense. Snowdrifts had shifted overnight, the road was a maze of hazards, and we knew the threat wasn't gone. Whoever they were organized, dangerous, and likely still searching. When we reached the main camp, authorities took over. The man handed over the evidence. His identity was confirmed, and the story unraveled. He had stumbled upon a smuggling operation that used pipeline access points to hide stolen goods. The men after him had already killed 2 people in the lower camps who got too close. If we hadn't intervened, he wouldn't have made it. Driving back to our shelter later, I realized how fragile survival is up here. The snow, the wind, and the cold are one kind of danger. People can be far worse. Out here, you rely on instincts, on trust with those around you, and sometimes on luck that the storm itself keeps predators at bay. That day, the 4 of us understood something we'd always known but never truly felt. Out here, every decision matters. Every second counts. And when criminals are involved, the North Slope's cold isn't your worst enemy. The people hunting you are. I had been stationed at a small, isolated mining outpost near the Brooks Range for about 6 months. The place was tiny, a handful of modular cabins, a generator, and enough supplies to last a month if nothing went horribly wrong. The isolation was brutal. For hours on end, it was just snow, ice, and the constant howl of the wind bouncing off the mountains. My only companions were my coworkers, Lena, who ran communications, Dave, the heavy equipment operator, and Tom, the camp cook. It was mid-January, and the temperature had dropped below -40. The wind gusts felt like needles against exposed skin. That night, after finishing my rounds inspecting the fuel lines, I returned to the main cabin and found Lena staring at the satellite monitor, her face pale. "There's a snowmobile out there," she said quietly. "Tracks lead right to the river about 3 miles from here. And then, they stop." I frowned. Out here, tracks disappearing in the snow often meant someone had gone off-road into the wilderness, probably lost, maybe worse. Dave shrugged. "Could be hunters," he said. "Might have run out of fuel or gotten buried in a drift." Tom, busy stirring stew, didn't look up. "If someone's out there, we won't see them until morning," he muttered. But Lena shook her head. "No, these tracks, they're fresh, and someone's following them." I grabbed my heavy parka and boots. "We need to check it out." All of us. We mounted the ATVs, engines whining against the wind. Visibility was almost nothing. Snowflakes whipped sideways, turning night into a white wall. I led the way, Lena behind me, Dave and Tom covering flanks. The tracks led toward the frozen Yukon River, where the ice was thick but unpredictable. About a mile out, we saw movement. A man hunched over, pulling a large duffel bag. His parka was shredded, hands raw and bleeding. He staggered, slipping on the ice, but kept going. We stopped a safe distance away, engines off, watching. "Looks like trouble," Dave muttered. I nodded. Out here, trouble could kill in minutes. We decided to approach slowly, keeping ATVs running just enough to stay warm. When he saw us, the man froze, eyes wide with panic. He dropped the bag, backing up slightly. Don't "Don't come closer," he shouted, voice cracking. "They're after me! They'll kill!" Lena stepped forward. "We're not going to hurt you. You need help." He shook his head violently, muttering something about evidence, can't let them get it. We had no choice. I dismounted and, with Dave and Lena covering, approached him. His body was stiff, exhaustion obvious. I grabbed his arm, trying to calm him. He didn't resist, but trembled violently. Back at the cabin, we set him by the heater. Tom poured hot broth while Lena checked over his injuries. He had frostbite on fingers, shallow cuts, and bruising along his arms. Finally, he spoke clearly. I saw them. They took the gold from the mining site. I saw it. They killed the other guy and tried to cover it. They don't want proof. They'll come for me." That explained the duffel. Inside were documents, photos, and a small sample of gold, evidence the criminals would kill to retrieve. The storm raged outside, visibility zero. Satellite communications were unreliable. We had to survive the night without knowing if someone was outside. Around 2 a.m., there was a thud on the door, heavy, deliberate. Someone was testing the cabin. My heart hammered. Out here, in temperatures this low, exposure could kill in minutes, but someone with intent could reach us even faster. Dave and I reinforced the doors with furniture, while Lena kept the man calm, and Tom armed himself with a rifle. The hours crawled. Every gust of wind, every creak of the cabin made us flinch. By first light, the footsteps stopped, and the storm eased slightly. Tracks in the snow led away from the cabin. Whoever had been hunting him had temporarily left. We carefully packed the evidence and used the ATVs to transport it toward the nearest ranger station, about 15 miles away. The journey was treacherous, snowdrifts, thin ice, and temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. But we made it without incident. Authorities arrived and took over. The man's story checked out: a gold smuggling operation, violence and corruption tied to the region's mining operations. If we hadn't acted, he likely wouldn't have survived the night, or the criminals. Driving back to the cabin, exhausted, frostbitten, and mentally drained, I realized that survival in the Alaskan interior wasn't just about enduring the cold. It was about reading danger, trusting your team, and being ready to fight, run, or improvise at any moment. The wilderness was unforgiving, but sometimes the people chasing you were far worse. That night, with the wind still howling outside and the frozen mountains looming, I understood something deep. Survival isn't just enduring nature, it's outsmarting those who think they can take what's yours. And out here, the stakes are always life and death. I had been stationed at a remote logging camp deep in the Alaskan interior for 2 winters. By this point, I thought I knew the rhythm of the land, the way the snowdrifts shift overnight, how the wind carries sound, and how quickly the cold can turn from uncomfortable to deadly. That winter was worse than most. Temperatures hovered around -35, with wind gusts making it feel like -50. Our crew was small: myself, Ryan, a veteran logger, Megan, in charge of communications and safety, and Ben, who handled machinery. It was late January when the trouble began. We had finished a day clearing timber near the frozen river that ran through our camp. The wind had been picking up, and clouds had rolled in thick and low, a signal of the storm to come. By nightfall, the sky had turned a deep gray, and snow began falling in heavy sheets. We were back at camp, huddled in the main cabin, when Megan picked up a faint transmission on the satellite radio. The signal was broken, but we caught enough words to understand someone nearby was calling for help. Ryan swore under his breath. Out here, in this storm, could be anyone, could be trouble. But Megan was already prepping the snowmobiles. We can't ignore it. Could be someone lost, or worse. We mounted the snowmobiles, engines roaring against the wind, headlights barely cutting through the falling snow. The tracks led us several miles along the riverbank. It was slow going, drifts up to our knees, the ice cracking under the machines in spots. The storm wasn't just snow anymore. Gusts hit like walls, and visibility was almost zero. Finally, we saw him. A man, hunched over, clutching a small duffel bag. His coat was torn, gloves gone, and his face red from cold. He was struggling forward, every step an effort. The duffel left a trail behind him in the snow, dragging like a sled. We stopped at a safe distance. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to cut through the wind. "We're here to help." The man froze, eyes wide with panic. "They are after me!" he shouted. "I've got it. They can't get it." Megan looked at me. We can't just leave him here. I nodded. Out here, leaving someone in the storm was a death sentence. We approached carefully, keeping an eye on his hands. Out in these conditions, even someone desperate could be dangerous. He allowed us to help him onto the snowmobile. He was light, almost suspiciously so, but too weak to resist. We covered him with blankets, warning him to stay low. Back at camp, the truth became clearer. The duffel bag contained documents, small electronic drives, and maps, evidence of illegal logging and a smuggling operation tied to the region. He had witnessed the crime and fled, hoping to survive the wilderness and reach someone who could help. The storm worsened overnight. Gusts slammed against the cabins, rattling windows and doors. Every creak made our nerves tighten. We took turns watching the perimeter, rifles at the ready, snowmobiles prepped to leave in an instant. The man was shivering uncontrollably, frostbite already forming on fingers and cheeks. Then came the first sign of trouble. Footsteps in the snow outside. Not random, heavy, deliberate, moving around the camp. Someone had tracked him this far. Ryan and I reinforced the doors with logs and furniture, while Megan stayed with the man, keeping him calm. Ben checked the generators and heaters, ensuring they wouldn't fail. The storm masked most sounds, but we could hear the crunching of snow as the pursuers approached. Hours dragged on. Each gust of wind, each creak of the cabins, felt like it could be the moment they broke through. We rotated shifts, maintaining vigilance while keeping the man alive and warm. By early morning, the storm finally eased enough to see faint footprints retreating into the woods. Whoever had been hunting him had temporarily withdrawn, leaving us a narrow window to move. We carefully packed the evidence and prepared the snowmobiles for the journey to the ranger station, 15 miles away across treacherous ice and snowdrifts. Every mile was tense. Ice cracking under the machines, wind gusts pushing us sideways, snow hiding obstacles. Once at the ranger station, authorities took over. The man's story was verified. Illegal logging, smuggling, and violence in the interior. Without our intervention, he likely wouldn't have survived the night or the criminals pursuing him. Driving back to camp, exhaustion and frostbite weighing on us, I realized that survival in these conditions isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about reading danger, trusting your team, and being ready for anything. Because out here, the wilderness can be as dangerous as the people who think can exploit it. That night, I understood something crucial. The storm is never your only enemy. Sometimes, the people chasing you, desperate and ruthless, can be far deadlier than the cold. And surviving both requires vigilance, courage, and a team willing to risk everything for each other. I had been working at a remote communications relay station near the Kuskokwim Mountains for almost 3 years. The job was isolated, grueling, and unforgiving. For weeks at a time, the only sounds were the howl of the wind and the constant creak of the metal tower swaying against the snow. That winter was particularly brutal. Temperatures had dipped below -40, and blizzards came and went with little warning. My coworkers were Ethan, a grizzled technician who had worked Alaska's interior for decades, Sarah, a young engineer new to the wilderness, and Luis, our cook and general maintenance guy. It was mid-February when the trouble began. The morning had started like any other. I checked the relay equipment for interference. Sarah was cataloging data, Ethan was maintaining the generator, and Luis was prepping breakfast. But the satellite phone crackled to life with a panicked voice. "Help! I need help. They're after me." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only static. We all froze. Out here in the middle of nowhere, hearing a voice like that wasn't normal. Ethan swore under his breath. Sounds like someone wandered too far or ran into bad people. Sarah looked at the monitor, trying to triangulate the signal. It's faint and it's moving, fast. Luis sighed. We can't just ignore it. Out here, someone that desperate won't last long in the cold. We decided to go. I grabbed my parka, boots, and emergency gear. Ethan readied the snowmobiles and Sarah packed a first aid kit. Luis carried extra blankets and some high-calorie rations. The four of us set out, engines roaring against the whipping snow. The tracks led us through a narrow canyon between two ridges. Visibility was almost zero, the snowflakes heavy and blinding. After roughly 30 minutes, we spotted him, a man hunched over carrying a small crate. His parka was torn, gloves missing, and blood streaked across his face. He staggered, slipping on ice, but kept moving as if the snow itself were trying to hold him back. We stopped at a safe distance. "Hey!" I shouted over the wind. "We're here to help." He froze, eyes wide and darting. They're after me. Can't let them get it." Ethan glanced at me. "Sounds like serious trouble." I nodded. Out here, hesitation could mean death. Slowly, carefully, we approached him, keeping hands visible. He allowed us to help him onto one of the snowmobiles, covering him with blankets. The crate he carried clattered against the snowmobile, revealing documents and what looked like a small hard drive. Back at the station, the truth came out in fragments. The man had witnessed a violent crime, a smuggling operation using remote Alaskan supply routes. The crate contained evidence he had managed to secure: maps, photos, and digital files showing the identities of those involved. They had already killed 2 people to cover their tracks. Now, he was their next target. The storm outside worsened. Gusts slammed against the metal walls, rattling windows and doors. Every creak, every howl made our hearts pound. The man shivered uncontrollably, frostbite forming on fingers and cheeks. Then came the first sign of pursuit. Footsteps in the snow outside, heavy, deliberate, methodical. Someone had tracked him all the way to the relay station. Ethan and I reinforced the doors with spare crates and equipment, while Sarah stayed with the man, keeping him calm. Luis checked the backup generators and heaters, ensuring they wouldn't fail. The night stretched on, each hour feeling like an eternity. Every sound, the wind, a distant howl, a snap of ice, made us flinch. We rotated shifts, maintaining vigilance, watching for any sign of the intruders. The man muttered repeatedly about, "They'll come back, they'll find me," and each time the fear in his eyes was undeniable. By early morning, the storm eased slightly. Faint footprints retreated into the wilderness. Whoever had been hunting him had temporarily left. We carefully packed the evidence, preparing to move him toward a ranger station roughly 20 miles away. The journey was treacherous. Thin ice, hidden snowdrifts, and the constant threat of frostbite. Every mile demanded full attention. When we finally reached the ranger station, authorities took over. The man's story was verified. A violent smuggling operation exploiting remote supply routes, with multiple murders committed to cover it up. Had we not intervened, he likely wouldn't have survived the storm or the criminals. Driving back to our station, exhausted and frostbitten, I realized something crucial. Surviving in Alaska isn't just about enduring the cold. It's about reading danger, trusting your team, and being prepared to act instantly. The wilderness is unforgiving, but people chasing you can be far more dangerous. That night, with the wind howling against the station and the mountains looming, I understood this clearly. The storm is one enemy, but desperation and violence can be another. Survival depends on courage, instinct, and the few people you can truly rely on in a world that feels completely cut off from the rest of humanity. I've been running trucks on the Dalton Highway for over 10 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road doesn't care who you are. It's a frozen ribbon through a wasteland where mistakes kill, and the weather can turn on you faster than you can think. That February in 2019, I was hauling a load of drilling equipment up to Prudhoe Bay, and the storm I hit on the way back is something I'll never forget. The weather had been building all day. By late afternoon, the visibility was maybe 30 feet, snow whipping sideways across the highway. The chains on my tires rattled on the ice, the heater blasting full power to keep me from freezing, and my thermos of coffee barely keeping my hands warm while I gripped the wheel. I'd driven this road hundreds of times, but the Dalton has a way of humbling even the most experienced driver. A few hours out of Coldfoot, I saw something in the distance, motion. At first, I thought it was a moose or some debris, but as I got closer, I realized it was a man. Walking along the shoulder, head down, bundled in a parka. The wind tore at him, snow piling on his boots, and he was making slow, unsteady progress. I hit the brakes hard, the trailer sliding just enough to make me curse under my breath. Nobody should be walking out here in -40 temperatures. Not without proper gear, not without a plan. I parked as close as I dared and jumped out, the wind immediately stealing my breath. "Hey!" I yelled over the roar. "Do you need help? Come on, get in the truck." He didn't react at first, just kept walking. Then I saw it, the way he moved. Not a normal stagger from the cold, but exhaustion, hypothermia. His steps were slow, arms loose at his sides, shoulders slumped. I could see frost forming on the edges of his parka hood. I ran toward him, snow up to my knees, and grabbed his shoulder. "Come on, man, we'll get you warm." Finally, he looked up. Pale, lips slightly blue, eyes glazed but still conscious. A few shallow breaths, shallow enough to worry me, but alive. I helped him to the truck, and he climbed in without saying a word. His body was cold, every muscle stiff, but at least he was responsive when I guided him. I cranked the heat, gave him my extra gloves, and offered him coffee. His hands shook violently as he held the mug, but he managed to drink a few sips. "You're lucky we found you," I said. "You could have been out there for hours." He nodded slightly, but didn't speak much. I checked him for injuries, nothing broken, but signs of frost nip on his ears and nose. I wrapped a spare blanket around him and focused on the road. The storm wasn't letting up, visibility dropping to maybe 20 feet. I asked him questions, gently, trying not to startle him. Where was he going? What happened? He explained he'd been traveling on a snowmobile from a camp, got caught in the whiteout, and tried to walk back to the road. His sled had broken through thin ice, and he'd been stranded for hours. That explained the exhaustion, the frozen clothing, the desperation. As the miles ticked by, the tension never eased. Every drift, every ridge could hide a ditch or a patch of black ice. I drove slowly, constantly scanning the sides of the road. The man sipped his coffee quietly, occasionally shivering despite the heat. I knew he was in the early stages of hypothermia, confusion, slow movements, drowsiness. If we didn't get him somewhere warm soon, it would get worse fast. We reached a small prefab shelter used by pipeline workers and truckers in emergencies. I parked as close as I could, climbed out, and helped the man inside. Even moving him a few yards took effort. His legs were stiff, movements slow, almost mechanical. Once inside, I laid him on one of the bunks, wrapped in blankets. I checked his pulse again, slow but steady. He was alive. That was all that mattered. Outside, the storm still screamed across the tundra. Inside, the heat began to take hold, his shivering gradually easing. I stayed with him, making coffee and keeping an eye on him, making small talk to keep him. Hours crawled by. The storm outside didn't let up. We had no radio contact. Static was all that came through. I kept checking him for signs of worsening hypothermia, confusion, slowed breathing, lethargy. Every few minutes, I offered water, small sips, and encouraged him to move fingers and toes under the blankets. By dawn, the storm had finally eased enough to see the road clearly. He was alert now, able to speak a little more, though still exhausted. I helped him back into the truck, ensuring he could handle the heat from the cabin and had enough water. I dropped him at the nearest safe checkpoint for truckers and pipeline workers, where they could get him proper medical attention. Driving away, I felt the weight of what could have happened. One wrong step in that storm, 1 mile too far from shelter, and he might not have made it. Out here in Alaska, in the dead of winter, survival isn't about luck. It's about timing, equipment, and paying attention to every detail. One mistake and the cold claims you. I never saw that man again, but I think about him every winter, every time I drive the Dalton. The memory of helping someone who should have been gone, the sheer quiet terror of being in a storm that could kill you in minutes, stays with you. The Dalton doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. You carry it with you, every mile, every year, until the day you don't drive it anymore. Thank you so much for watching. Every video on this channel takes a lot of time, effort, and hard work behind the scenes to put together for you. If you enjoyed it, the best way you can support us is by hitting the like button, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. Your support really helps us keep creating more content like this. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.